Hey YouTube, it's Pastor Dwayne here. I am here finally, right? It's been a little while, hasn't it? I hope everybody has had a wonderful Christmas. Today is Boxing Day. Now, I didn't know this, but apparently those who do not live in Canada, maybe this is another Commonwealth nation thing. We celebrate something called Boxing Day. It's just the day after Christmas for you to get your ducks in a row. But apparently when I talk to some of my American friends, they're like, what is Boxing Day? So I didn't know that. I didn't know that Americans didn't do Boxing Day. So I have a holiday and I had the whole day off today and I just relaxed. And by relaxed, what I mean is I went online and I started my search on Matthew 125. So we're going to take a look at a textual variant today. And I am excited to show you this one because this one is a textual variant that's actually going to be in our Byzantine 2026 edition. By the way, it's looking like it's going to be for certain. I should pause, bring that down, but it's looking like it's going to be a 2026 edition. Printing's going to take a while. We've discovered there's going to be some time issues there, but we should have everything completed in the early part of 2026. That's the goal. That's the goal. But we don't want to pressure those too much who are doing a good chunk of the work. So anyway, I'm excited to bring to you this discussion. Now, what I want to do is I want to pull up the page that we're going to be looking at because this page has the textual variant that we're going to be looking at. So I just minimized some stuff here. Hold on. It's been so long. I forget how to actually I forget how to actually live stream. Hold on here. I saved my image because it's an image file. I took an image file. You know what? Let's just do this. I thought I had saved it somewhere. So the interesting thing that happened here is my studio was a big fat mess. I guess the kids took my power cables so they could charge their Nintendos. And so I had to set everything up really quickly. So that's why I'm a little bit behind here and why I'm a bit, what's the term? Behind the ball. But, oh, here it is. I got it. It's loading. Look at that. And you know what? I am going to hit the record button here too so that I can get a local copy of what I'm doing. There we go. By the way, this mug, I got this for Christmas. Be careful or you will end up in my sermon. I'm having a nice decaf right now. All right. So let's take a quick look at the comments before I get everything on here and show you what's going on and tell you what we're going to talk about. So we've got Get Gnomed is in there. He is our token moderator, our token lawn ornament, and he'll be making sure that you guys stay in line, and only say nice things. Okay, you can say constructive things. Okay, you can criticize. Just be nice. All right, we got Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak is in here. Ugh, I hate cheap pens. Me too. FN Jesus Freak. Tony Parkinson, UK. He's up here from England. That's awesome. Good to see you. Glad you're here. How is the weather up there in England? It's been pretty warm lately, but we're supposed to get a dumping of snow. Get Gnome says you have to box people after Christmas. Actually, I think it's a reference to, honestly, truthfully, I think what it is. Okay, and I haven't even looked this up, and I'm totally ignorant. Okay, but I always remember Boxing Day as the day where you go back to the store to return all the stuff that didn't work or for whatever reason. And so you brought all the boxes back, and that's why it's called Boxing Day. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up off the top of my head. Who knows? But that's how I've always understood Boxing Day. But nonetheless, I will take it off as a stat holiday, and I will enjoy it. All right, so Get Gnome says it's when you put... Tony Parkinson says it's when you put all the unwanted presents back in their boxes and yeah, there you go, to take back to the store. See, you got it. Cold, but not you got it. All right. Cold, but not raining. All right. Okay. So let's get into this. So here's my plan. So this is the start of a series, and this is going to be 50 textual variants. And the reason I'm choosing 50 is not by accident, okay? When we put together our Byzantine 2026 edition and started laying out how we were going to do everything and pull all that apart and what we're going to put in the apparatus and deciding all that, One of the things that we've decided to do was to include a second apparatus. So you get a first apparatus that tells you all the differences between all the printed editions, and you can see all the information in there. I'll show you that in a second here. But then we opted to select 50 textual variants that we thought were important, either from a popular perspective, or maybe there was something specific about the textual variant that we thought was worthy of discussion. And so we selected 50 of those to put into the Byzantine 2026 edition, and we included a second apparatus. So you have one apparatus with all the printed Greek New Testaments, and then a second apparatus specifically for those 50 textual variants. So I'm going to be going through, over the course of a year or two, every single one of those 50 variants. And we're going to do a deep dive into them to see why it is that the Byzantine reading had been selected that specific way. So the first one is up, and we're starting that today, and it's going to be Matthew chapter 1, verse 25. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you the page from our Byzantine edition. This is the 2026 edition here. Let me see if I can slide this over here. Now I can maybe zoom in a little bit here, because what we're interested in, okay, is this is our passage here, chapter 1, verse 25. Okay, uk eginos gen aftineos u eteken ton huion aftis ton prototokon, ke kalasan to onoma aftuisun. Now that is it in the Byzantine text form, the 2026 edition, which is essentially the same here as all the other editions, okay? There's not a lot of differences in the main body of the text. Any sort of Byzantine-related text is going to contain this specific variant, ton huionaftis ton prototokon, which means her only begotten, prototokon, that's monogenes, her firstborn son. So the difference here is whether or not verse 25 says she gave birth to a son, or whether it says she gave birth to her firstborn son. Okay, now this is actually quite an interesting textual variant, and it's surprising to see how much is actually out there on it. Not a lot of people are willing to spill a lot of ink on it. We'll see. I got Houghton's commentary here. It came in the mail this week, and I had a chance to take a look. And I was kind of disappointed. Gonna be honest. I was disappointed in this entry here because it didn't really add much of anything to the conversation that hadn't already been said by previous commentaries. But we'll get into that. And then there's another little grievance I have with the commentary so far. And of course, I'll show you that as well. But as we look into our edition, you will notice here that there isn't any ecthesis. Okay, I know in the last video I said we were going to do ecthesis, but here's what happened. We printed the edition, took a look at the font, and there was a mismatch between the system font and what came out on the printers. So we realized we had to make the font bigger. Now everybody wants a bigger font, we get that. But in order to make the font bigger, we had no choice but to do away with ecthesis. So this edition will not have ecthesis. We wanted to maintain the wide margins, and we wanted the font larger. And I think that's what most people would want before ecthesis. We just could not make ecthesis fit no matter how much you tried. So kudos to Jeff for trying, but it just didn't happen. Anyway, so if we come down to the apparatus, it will tell us, right, verse 125, here's the variant, ton huionaftis ton prototokon, that is her firstborn son. And that is basically the reading for every Greek New Testament that is based on the Byzantine text, whether that's F35, whether that's the majority text, whether that's the Antoniades text, or the Textus Recetpus has this reading. The only place that is different is under the critical texts, okay? And this includes texts like Westcott and Hort, Nestle Allen, 28th edition, ECM, although I don't think ECM is really is done for Matthew. I believe Tyndale House is in here. They all went with huion, with son. So Mary gave birth to a son. So you can see that in the first apparatus. But then the second apparatus, like I was telling you about, is right here with the first of those 50 variants that we selected. So you can see at the outset how many Uncial manuscripts actually contain the Byzantine reading. it isn't just like a handful of manuscripts, and it isn't just a handful of unsealed manuscripts. What you find is that the Byzantine reading is actually supported not only by a majority of manuscripts, but is even supported by a majority of the unsealed manuscripts. Like, this has got tremendous, tremendous external support. Her firstborn son. Let me take a sip here. This is the ownage sip. All right, Jew and Greek is in the house. How is it going there, Brother Rod? Happy Boxing Day. Thank you very much. Boxing Day. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas over there. All right, so this is what we have in our Byzantine 2026 edition. Again, you look at this and you just kind of laugh, because Huion, which is, and she gave birth to a son rather than gave birth to the firstborn son, gave birth to a son, is really only supported by 7 or 8 manuscripts. There's a little bit of a wiggle room in there why there's not as much certainty, and it has to do with manuscripts and your inability to see certain spots and stuff. But really, this boils down to a textual variant that is more than 1,400 manuscripts compared to 7 or 8. And of course, and I think, and again, and I know modern text critics today will say, no, it's not based all off of Aleph and B, Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. But interestingly enough, is every time you see Aleph and B together, you're like 95% guaranteed to be that's going to be the reading of the critical editions. And this is no different here, right? So a son has Aleph and B right there. Okay, then Z33, and there's a couple others, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So, popping over to the comments here, let's see. We've got Sal's C777. Hello, how's it going? Could it have been caused by homoteleuton skipping the on in weon to the on in prototokon? Possibility. But it's not likely. Interestingly enough, as much as I've been a little bit annoyed with Houghton's work here, he does touch on that, and I'll give you his answer when we go through that, because I think he's probably right there, but I don't think so. I think that's not as likely. Canadians are the nicest, most gentle people unless you give them a hockey stick. Yeah, well, you know why? It's because the Canadian geese keep everybody in line. Vulgate has her firstborn son. Indeed it does. So does, excuse me, the patriarchal text of the EO. Yes, the patriarchal text is also a Byzantine type text. I would consider it so. Okay, let me pop up my notes here. Now, I'm going to be doing this video in a little bit of a different way. Just because what I want to do with this, like I said, because this is going to be the first in a 50-part series, you might hear me repeat things, because what I'm going to do is when the video is over, I'm going to chop it up into little bitty bits. I'm probably going to cut out all of our discussion. I like doing the live streams because I get to interact with you, but not everybody wants to see those interactions, so I'm going to cut all those out. Any extraneous stuff that I'm talking about that's not related to Matthew 125 in the live stream, I usually cut all that stuff out. And what I want to do is when I'm done with these live streams is cut down the information into a shorter 20-minute video, if I can, on each of those 20 variants, just so it's not overbearing, and it's content that will be available to whoever happens to purchase one of these Byzantine 2026 editions. They can go and see the videos on each of those 50 variants as we talk about them. So again, if you hear me repeat something, that's just going to be for the sake of me being able to edit afterwards. So so if you don't like it, deal with it. Just kidding. All right. Okay, so let's start here. I want to pull open the verse, first of all, in question. I want to take a look at the footnotes because the footnotes are interesting. And actually, the footnotes were quite surprising. And one thing I didn't do is I didn't include the NET. I can put that in there. I'm gonna put the NET in there really quick. I'm gonna prep this up. There we go. Yeah, so Tony, I see your message there. Again, it's possible, but not likely. And the reason it's not likely, we'll get into that, but I'll just share it now, is Jerome in, was it the early 300s, late 200s? He was in a conversation with Helveticus. Is that how you say it? Helveticus? Helveticus, a writing called Against Helveticus. And in this writing, what he was doing is he was coming against the idea that Mary was not a perpetual virgin. So the whole discussion surrounding perpetual virginity of Mary. And so Jerome was clearly on the perpetual virgin side of the conversation. Helveticus wasn't. So Jerome, I'm going to write and I'm going to set him straight. But interestingly enough, Jerome in his commentary in Matthew, he doesn't have any qualms with using prototokos, firstborn. And so he quotes prototokos from Matthew 1:25. And interestingly, though, when he's discussing Helveticus, he discusses Helveticus from the description of a son as opposed to the firstborn son. So he doesn't seem to have qualms with you rather using a son or prototokos. But the point being is that if prototokos is supposed to be the difficult reading, right? If it's supposed to be the reading which was changed because, right? It's more likely that prototokos would not have been used editorially to show because of the perpetual virginity of Mary. Right now, again, I don't believe that. I think that after she had Jesus, that her and her husband continued with somewhat normal marriage life. But Helvidius, yes, that's it. But I have some thoughts on that, and we'll get there eventually. So let's pop this open here. So I want to show you the verse. So today we're going to take a look at Matthew 1:25, and the question is going to be whether the verse says her firstborn son, or whether the verse says a son. Okay, so we're going to read this in the New King James Version. The New King James Version has this, and he did not know her. I put the he in there, and did not know her till she had brought forth her firstborn son and called his name Jesus. Now, this is the key phrase here, her firstborn son. Because if you look in another Bible translation, like if we go to the ESV, for example, the ESV has Matthew 1:25 and says, but he knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. So what you're looking at here is the difference in Matthew 1:25 between the critical editions, which say a son, and essentially the Byzantine editions, which say her firstborn son. So when I say Byzantine editions, again, what I'm saying is the Byzantine text form, the Hodges-Farstad majority text, Family 35, the Antoniades text, the Textus Recetpus, right? These all have their firstborn son, like the New King James Version that I read to you. And all the critical editions, the editions of the Nestle-Aland text, the EC, I don't know if ECM's out with Matthew yet. I think the Tyndale House Greek New Testament goes with a son, and Westcott and Hort, and so on and so forth. So there's a definite, distinct divide between whether we have firstborn son from the Byzantine editions or a son from these critical editions. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the footnotes are incredibly eye-opening here. So the first one here, right, the New King James Version, this is why I like the New King James Version, by the way, is its footnotes are exceptionally good. So you have a footnote here, and it tells us that the Nestle-Aland text says a son. Okay, that's good. I like it. But if you go to something like the ESV and you take a look for a footnote, this is the interesting thing here. There is none. The ESV does not have a footnote here, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son. There's no footnote. Not at all. The New Revised Standard Version, if I'm not mistaken, does actually have one. And what's interesting here is this and the CSB are the CSB and the HCSB. So these three are the only ones I found that have a footnote here. So we have other ancient authority reads her firstborn son. Now, I can list them off. Let me just list off the different translations that I checked. I don't think I need to do them all. But the list of English translations that do not contain a footnote here, you've got the NASB, I think their 95 edition and their newer edition doesn't contain it. The English Standard Version does not have a footnote here. The NLT does not have a footnote here. The Lexham English Bible does not have a footnote here. The New International Version doesn't have a footnote here. The Legacy Standard Bible doesn't have a footnote. Man, the Berean Standard Bible even did not have a footnote. Now, I reached out to John Isett and I said, John, here's a footnote you probably should add in there. Now, to be fair, the Majority Standard Bible contains the footnote of what the critical text is, but nonetheless, it's surprising to see so many English Bibles not have a footnote here, because this reading makes up, wait for it, makes up almost all of the Greek New Testament evidence. So let me give you an example. I think there's 1,450 some manuscripts that contain Firstborn Son, and there is 7-ish that contain a son. That's it. 1,450 plus, okay? 1,450 plus versus 7 or 8 manuscript, primarily because of Aleph and B. If Aleph and B weren't in this list, they would not have made it. And 2 of those manuscripts that are listed, by the way, are Lacanus in the area, so you can't really tell what the reading is going to be. I tried to piece together something a little bit earlier, but I didn't have time to get it all together. But clearly, the manuscripts which you have to check, like 071, for example, you can't tell whether it's a son or whether it's Firstborn Son. You cannot tell. So anyway, I'm going to pop over the comments there because I see my friend Steve. Steve, how's it going? I hope you had a really good Christmas. It's been ages, man. Let me pop this over. Yeah. Hey, decided to use some hyper advanced research tools to settle the Boxing Day thing, lest we Canadians are too sound incredibly petty or like we only buy and sell junk. Wikipedia, the advanced tool, had a few variations, but ultimately it was always about giving and being generous. Interesting. Steve, that sounds like an AI answer. Man, I'm so glad to see you. Really, how's it going? It's been so long. Excuse me. Ross Lewichuk is in the comments. How's it going? Thanks for the $5 tip. One of my touchstones for choosing a Bible, a blessed and peaceful Christmas to all. Yes, thank you. We had a wonderful Christmas. All right. Let's come back to the comments. Let's come back to the notes here. I want to take a look here. So I always sound like AI. Nice. Yeah. So what's important to kind of recognize from all this is just simply that for whatever reason, this isn't seen as a very important textual variant to those who are putting together modern English Bibles. And really, it should be. I'm surprised to only see it in the NRSV, the CSB, and the HCSB. That's it. And of course, the New King James Version. But it's kind of, see, the New King James Version, it's a league in it. It's in a league of its own, seriously. All right. So I want to talk briefly about the manuscript support, and then we will dive into some of the commentaries on this one. So those who support the manuscripts which support a son, not Firstborn Son, but those that support a son, I've got Aleph and B, Codex Z 071, minuscule 133, 788, 1192, and 1582 with a star. So there's probably something going on there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2 of them say vid. And when we see vid, it means you have to go and look at it because there is some uncertainty there. I've looked at 071 and you cannot tell. You can't tell whether it says one way or the other. I bring it up here and show you, but you'll have to take my word for the time being. Because it's Lacanus at the very top of the manuscript, and there's no way of knowing what's in the line above it. So the line above it could be expanded to fit prototokon. That is Firstborn Son, or it could be from the previous verse, and then we only have a son in the one line. So 071 is out, so that leaves us with 8. Zvid, I haven't had a chance to look at. We'll probably look at it at some point just as an addendum to attach to this. But that leaves us with about 7, 2 of which are very early, and that is Aleph and B. So again, essentially, what we're looking at is a decision that is essentially based off of Aleph and B. And again, I know modern text critics today, they say they don't base things off of just Aleph and B, but 95% of the time when you see Aleph and B together, you are going to see a decision made for that specific reading by the modern text critics. So that's the Greek support. We have some Italian support, or some Latin support, I should say. We have an Egyptian manuscript, a Middle Egypt manuscript. We have a Syratonian manuscript, the Sahidic and the Bohairic, and a Georgian manuscript for a son. And then we have 2 church fathers, Ambrose and Chromatius. Now, when we move into the manuscript support for her firstborn son, as we have in the New King James Version, the support is wildly better. Like, it's not even on the same level. Okay, so listen to this. So the Palestinian Aramaic and the Old Latin manuscripts, they are split on this. Okay, half go one way, half go the other way. Okay, cool. The Vulgate goes for firstborn. The Harclaean Syriac favors firstborn. Okay, and this information is taken from James Snapp's blog. It's a link in the description of the video. We have the Armenian and the Ethiopic versions go with firstborn, and then the patristics. Okay, again, the early church fathers would support this. Are Jerome's commentary on Matthew. We have Cyril of Jerusalem. We have Didymus, Dub. I'm not sure what Dub is, but I think that's De Trinitari. Epiphanius, Chrysostom, Proclus, Augustine, Basil of Caesarea, and then more crazier, not a church father, but Firstborn Son is favored by, guess what? The Diatessaron in the 2nd century. Okay. We have widespread external support for Firstborn Son in this passage. So why is it not included in our modern English Bible translations? What is the reasoning behind that? So we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to walk you through 2 commentaries, and then I'll walk you through another commentary that's interesting that I found here. So I'm going to come over to my screen here, make sure I'm sharing, which I am. Good. Now I am going to pop over to Matthew 125. Matthew 125, where are you? Right there, right at the bottom. So we're going to zoom right in. We'll get you down here. Oh, no. There we go. Okay. So we're going to first look at Metzger's commentary. Like I said, I had Houghton's come in the mail. I'm so excited for this. So we'll take a look at his commentary right now. I'm just going to read it, the one entry. I don't think that's going to be a copyright issue or anything like that. If so, then they'll issue me a cease and desist or whatever. I don't think they'll do that. But all right. So this is why Metzger. This is his reasoning for coming down on the side of son. So they've got huion here, that means a son, and they've given it a rating of A, which means that they're very certain that this is the right reading. So those on the committee of the UBS, I think this would have been like the 3rd or the 4th edition. I can't remember which one. They're absolutely certain. They're pretty certain about their choice about a son. And it says, the Textus Recetpus following C, D, K, W, D, and pi, most minuscules inserts tone before weon and adds avtis tone prototokon. That's her firstborn. So he says, from Luke 2:7. Okay. That's an indication of where Metzger's going here. Okay. He is going to make an argument that there's a harmonization here with Luke 2:7. Now, could it be? I mean, there may be, right? There could be a chance, but I think there's a chance of something else happening. And again, I'll show you that when we get there. But he's going to insist that this is a harmonization with Luke 2:7, because Luke 2:7, what does Luke 2:7 say? It says that, it says her firstborn son. Now, he continues on here to say that the reading of the Sinaitic Syriac, she bore to him, that is to Joseph, a son, is in conformity with the singular reading of this manuscript in verse 16. See discussion above, and let's go here. Scroll up. There it is. Reading shared with the Seratonian Syriac, which has its single reading. In verse 21, shall bear to thee a son. So that's it. That's all Metzger says. Luke 2:7, and here's a weird reading. Harmonization. Luke 2:7. Here is a very weird reading. Okay, that's all that Metzger amounts to. Now, let me pull up Houghton's commentary. Now, I can't show you this. I think there's rules against showing it, but I can read it. So in Houghton's commentary here, he does the same thing, gives it an A rating. So he's pretty certain about this decision to go with a son. And he says this: most manuscripts read ton vion aftis ton prototokon, her firstborn son. And then he provides 04, 05 with an asterisk, so original scribe of Alexandrinus, 032, etc. He puts etc. There's only 8 manuscripts. Why'd you put etc.? Houghton, man, why did you just list the 8? If that's all there is, just list them. Anyway, he says to see Tut, Matthew TS4. So Tut is a volume which has a number of test passages where they collated as many manuscripts as they could get their hands on, hundreds of manuscripts. So essentially, for the time being, it's essentially a complete collation. Every manuscript that we know about for a given textual variant, TUT has listed all of it. So this is one of those test passages that we're looking at. Okay, Matthew 1:25 is one of those test passages. So we have a very good idea of what the textual external data is on this passage. But anyway, so he continues on. He says, but a group of important witnesses simply have huion, a son. And those important witnesses, I mistake that. I read that wrong. Aftis proton, her firstborn son, 04, 05, 032, etc. Okay, those are actually, okay, you know what? I'm going to redo this because it's going to make it easier to edit. Okay, so here's what Houghton says. He says, most manuscripts read ton vion aftis ton protokon, that's her firstborn son, and he gives us a couple, like a handful of manuscripts, right? 04, 05, Alexandrinus, right? 032, etc. C Tut, and he's saying C Tut, why? Because there's so many. There's 1,400 some manuscripts that support this, okay? But then he says, but a group of important witnesses simply have huion, a son. He says, a group of important witnesses simply have a son. And so he lists them, and this is where I got really annoyed. He listed 01 and 03, Aleph and B, 035, and family 1, and then etc., right? Why etc.? There's only 8 witnesses. Just list the 8 witnesses. It probably took you more time to come up with the brain power to put etc. than to list the other 4 witnesses. Okay, maybe you just didn't want to deal with the vids. I don't know. But either way, okay. All right. So he continues on. The possibility that the additional phrase was omitted by I skip. Now, somebody in the comments was asking about this. The possibility that the additional phrase was omitted by I skip from the end of huion to the end of prototokon is negligible, given the addition of ton, the, at the beginning, and the fact that huion is often written in as nominum sacrum. That is, it would just have the epsilon and the nu. It wouldn't write his name out in full. So the omicron and the nu wouldn't actually have been there. So it's less likely that this would have been the case of a simple is that homeoteliaton when it's at the end of a word, right? So that more than likely would not have been the case. And I think he does well, Houghton does, in pointing this out. So he continues, instead, it seems that the shorter form, with its early attestation, has been expanded to the text found in the parallel passage, you guessed it, at Luke chapter 2, verse 7. So what is Houghton saying here? Exactly the same thing that Metzger said like 100 years earlier. Maybe not 100 years earlier, which is what? It's a gospel harmonization from Luke chapter 2, verse 7. But I want to ask the question, can we really say that this is a gospel harmonization of Luke 2, 7? Again, I'm going to say, probably not, because we have a better way to explain that. And we'll get there in a second. Now, the last thing I want to do here, the last commentary, I want to take a look at before we get into Dr. Borland's work is the Net Bible. And you would think that the Net Bible, in all of its, 60,000 plus footnotes, you would think that it would have something to say on Matthew 125. But just like all of our other modern English Bible translations, the Net Bible, the editors of the Net Bible decided, Matthew 125, 1,450 some manuscripts to 8, it's just not worthwhile. It's just not worth talking about. This is wild. Look, here's the verse. But did not have marital relations with her until she gave birth to a son, whom he named Jesus. Okay, is there a footnote here? Oh, there's one here because there's a study note, I think. Let's see. A textual note, and this is a question of how to translate the Greek word to know, which in this passage is a sexual knowing, right? A husband and a wife come together sexually. That's normal in marriage. That's the point that he's trying to make here. But they don't have anything on the textual issue at all. Nothing. The Net Bible. Man, get your stuff together. Okay. Whoever the editors are of the Net Bible, I think Dan Wallace was on the committee. Man, you need to have Matthew 125 in there. It's an important variant. I know Houghton and I know Metzger have assigned it an A rating as a son, and you think you can ignore it, but you can't ignore it. It's 1,450 plus manuscripts against 8. 9, but 2 of which, right? Okay. So it's just mind blown when I was shocked when I saw the English Bible translations not have a footnote. And I was especially shocked when I saw the NET did not have a textual note here. It is a very important textual matter and really should have been in here. All right. Let's come over to the comments really quickly, and then we're going to pop over to Jonathan Borland's work because his commentary on this passage is excellent. It's excellent, far beyond anything that Metzger Houghton has provided. So let me hit the button here. We'll come over to the comments and see what you guys are saying. Kevin Hawthorne is in here. How's it going, brother? Hope things are well with you. Shamgar Mind is here, and Steve's laughing. That's good. All right. Where are we? All right, so we had Ross Lewichuk. Again, thanks for the $5 super chat. It's really helpful. Helps pay some of the bills this channel has incurred. I'm almost done paying off this mic. So, all right. There we go. All right, it's one of those verses modified in the Gideon ESV. Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. So for those that aren't aware, the ESV made a deal some time ago with the Gideon Bible and Tract Society, with the Gideons, that they distribute Bibles like hotels and stuff, right? And so they had a special edition of the ESV created where they had a number of those Byzantine readings added back in to the ESV, which is kind of cool. I've been trying to get my hands on one, but I haven't been able to find one. So, excuse me. All right. Tony Parkinson says Matthew 1:24-25 makes it clear she wasn't a perpetual version. Absolutely. I think that's a very difficult dogma to retain in light of the scriptures. When Joseph woke up, he did as the Lord angel had commanded him. He married her, but did not have sexual relations with her until she gave birth to a son, and he named him Jesus. Right. So the Geneva Thompson notes and IIRC John Wesley's notes worm around that. The Thompson notes mention Michal in 1 Samuel. I see that the Sinaitic Syriac manuscript doesn't have it, but it has a strange reading instead. Yeah, that's right. When you go into the TUT collation, there's I think there's like 6 or 7 strange readings. It's not just one. There's a number with just like one manuscript here and one manuscript there with this reading and that reading. But by far and away, the 2 readings which win out are one, the the Firstborn with the 1,450 plus, and then just simply a son, Ton Huion with the article. Huion without the article, has like 8 manuscripts, and then the rest is all just riffraff. All right, so on the Discord, I showed what I was doing that showed why I was a bit quiet. in the form of a picture of a page of handwriting showing the pericope adulterae. Cool. Yeah, I haven't really been on the the Discord server a whole lot. But yeah, we'll see. Things have been busy. Shamgar Mine says, I recognize some of you in this chat. What resources would you recommend for a new Greek student? Okay. For a new Greek student, I learned from Mounts. I had his second edition of his Greek grammar. I learned from Wallace. I read his work. And then I read some of the older stuff. So Samuel Green, actually, ironically, has a grammar that I read from quite a bit. Dana Manti, I have them as well. A.T. Robertson, as you start to expand a little bit, he's really good. Greek for the rest of us is interesting. That'll help refresh your mind on how the grammatical constructions work, like what the aorist is, and what the perfect tense, all that kind of stuff with subjunctive, all these things. Rodney Decker Brown had done a volume called "It's Still Greek to Me," I think, which I found really helpful. David Allen Black has done one as well, which is good. I had a couple readers. Like if you're going to do the work, get yourself a reader's edition and do the exercises, because that's where it's going to help you the most when you actually do. You want to take in, but you also want to produce out. That's kind of the thing that helps. I was part of a forum where we would talk back and forth in Greek. And then if you go back in my videos, right, if you go back like 10 years, you'll see some really old crappy videos where I attempt to speak in Koine Greek. And that was part of my learning process. So you can see that where I was talking about kinarion mu, tonomov, Nitros. Unfortunately, our dog Nitros, he passed away in a car accident shortly after we moved into our last house. This was about 10 years ago. But yeah, poor doggy. All right. So yeah, do that. Make sure you're, just make sure you're talking about all the time, and be around people who are learning as well, because that will keep you encouraged. Yeah, another interesting thing. Okay, here's another helpful thing. There's another book from A.T. Robertson called A Minister and His Greek New Testament, just a tiny little book. And it tells the story of John Brown of Addington in there, about how he didn't go to school, didn't do any of that stuff, but he just wanted to learn the language. And so he took it upon himself. He took his Latin work and his Greek work, and he just learned it. And then it gives you a whole bunch of other like super helpful reasons why you would learn Greek. It's just a very good, encouraging book. And I usually read it about once a year, once every year or two. Because what it does is it keeps you motivated, and that's going to be the most important thing, is staying motivated to learn a language, because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Like, you're going to be doing this for years, right? Like you're not going to stop. You're just going to keep going. You're going to keep learning Greek, because that's how it is. You just keep learning. If you're the kind of person that wants to get in there and master it and be done with it, that's not what it is. That's not the point at all. You're going to get in, and you're going to keep learning, and you're going to keep reading, and you're going to keep learning. That's what it is. And so you need to be motivated to keep doing that. So A Minister and His Greek New Testament by A.T. Robertson. All right. Okay. I could do a video just on things that help me do Greek. Maybe one time. All right. So Kevin Hawthorne, he says, good evening. How's it going? Good to see you here. There are, what's going on here? So we've got two unusual readings, two usual explanations. They weren't literal sons. West doesn't pass the sniff test. They were Joseph's existing sons. East also doesn't pass the sniff test. Yeah, we'll get into some of that. I got some of that here. So Sal C77 says, if the Catholics or the Orthodox wanted to erase something that makes it seemed that Mary had more children, they would have removed it also from Luke 2:7. The Vulgate and the EO text both include it in Matthew. Yeah, and that's just it, right? So this we'll get into it, but that's the harder reading, right? The Prototokos, that's the harder reading. So yeah, we'll get into that. Manuscript W, 5th century, has it in Matthew, but it's missing from Luke. Scribe makes mistakes. That's all it proves. Exactly. James Snapp talks a little bit about the interesting things in Codex W in regards to the Luke 2:7. And yet the Vulgate says firstborn. Right. It's the hard reading. It's the hard reading. So why is the critical text why didn't they go with it? I don't understand. It's the hard reading. Maybe it's the hard reading because it's not in Aleph and B, right? Okay, I'm just poking. I know that's not what CT guys believe. Okay, I'm just poking. All right, so all those early manuscripts, versions, and patristics were all actively changing the text just to harmonize it with Luke 2. That seems extremely unlikely. It does. I agree. The Gideon's ESV is actually available on their app if you're just looking for the tag. Yeah, I'm looking for more than just simply, I want to have a volume in my hand. So hopefully one day one will come. I almost had one. Someone dropped off a box of ESV ones, and I checked, and they weren't the right ones. They turned out to be the NASB ones. Bill Mounts, that's right, good choice. Anyway, 315 here, heading to K and to the land of Z. There you go. Well, good night, Kevin. I'm glad, or Tony. I'm glad you could make it. We'll see you around if you happen to pop in next time. I still want to know why those few words removed couldn't be due to similar endings in word son. Oh, we read through that. You missed it, Sal. So basically the word son as huion with the omicron and the new almost guaranteed to not have been in there, except as far back as we know, the what do you call it? The nomina sacrum was there. So in almost all of the text, it's going to appear as an epsilon and a nu with a line over it without the omicron in there. So the omicron matching up with the omicron of prototokon most likely would not have worked. So I am with Houghton on this one. That was Houghton's suggestion, that it's not likely to be the case. Not saying it couldn't have been. Maybe there was a very early manuscript somewhere with that. But there's better ways and other ways to explain it. All right. John Brown, he of the Self-Interpreting Bible. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, we got lots of comments here. Transcribing John into a cheap notebook. Here's my comment about cheap pens. Has me starting to recognize some Greek words. There you go. You can order that special Gideon ESV Pocket New Testament from Friends of the Gideons. The introduction explains that. Oh, there we go. Okay, maybe I'll do that. Steve, yeah, I secretly respected you back in the day when you really committed yourself to your Greek studies. There we go. Thank you. Sal says, I took Gideon's ESV from an old age home. I replaced it with a few KJVs. I hope what I did wasn't wrong. I don't think so. To be honest, I think a lot of the older people probably prefer the KJV. I've noticed in my own ministry with the nursing home that the older folks actually want the KJV. They prefer that. That's what they grew up with. That's what they're comfortable with. So that's cool. So FN Jesus Freak says, I have 2 Gideon ESVs, a full Bible and a pocket edition. And Helga Evanson, how's it going? It's sort of true. The non-Aleph beat reading is less likely to be original. Well, that's just it, right? Because Aleph and B, the reason why they are weighted so highly, right? I think, why they started to be weighed so highly was because of their discovery in Westcott and Hort's Greek New Testament, and essentially where Aleph and B were together, that was considered a good representation of the Alexandrian text, and I think that's what he called the neutral text. I always get that mixed up, but what had happened is, in citing them as a good representation as the Alexandrian text, he inadvertently set them up to be the standard by doing so. Because remember, the Alexandrian text type was seen as older and more reliable. So if you can get something out of the Alexandrian text type and say, here it is, then essentially what you've got, according to modern critical editions, is the original text. Now, is it just me, or am I getting a little fuzzy here in the camera? Let's see. So I think that's what's going on there. And so when you say that if they are together, it's less likely to be original. That is when they're together against the Byzantine text, right? I would go with the Byzantine text because I think a grouping of manuscripts like that is probably going to be better. All right. Okay, so you're right. The short and sacred name. I didn't think of that. Yeah. So I prefer the KJV. I didn't know how to get Gideon's. That's part of my preference for the KJV. Those are what you grew up with. Exactly. My full ESV was on eBay purchase. The other one of the ladies at the church was given, and I thought it might interest me. There you go. And they said, I was curious about this Gideon ESV to see what was added back. Yeah, me too. That's exactly what I'm curious about. So, all right. And Shamgar says, can you explain the Revelation 16:5 variant and why it's a big deal? Essentially, I'll just give you the like super quick 5-second one, and then maybe I'll do a video on it in the future. But Revelation 16:5 in the Textus Recetpus has a rendering that doesn't have any Greek manuscript support available to today. Textus Recetpus advocates will argue that Beza had an ancient manuscript with which he got his reading from that ended up in the TR. However, we are not aware of what that manuscript was, and we currently have nothing available to us today that tell us, that show us anywhere in any manuscript ever that we know of today of that specific reading. So essentially what this means for us today is it appears to be a conjectural emendation made by Beza in the Textus Recetpus. Now, the reason why that's a big deal, right, is because conjectural emendation is often seen as bad. And I think it is bad. I don't think we need conjectural emendation. The conjectural emendation is essentially when you guess at what a text is, when there's no other Greek manuscript support for something, but you just think that it's going to be something else because something just appears to not make sense or whatever, for whatever reason. I don't think we need that. We have enough evidence today. But the Textus Recetpus guys are typically like, that's bad. But then there's one in their own text, right? So again, I know that's debated, right? Calling it a conjectural emendation, because if Beza did actually have a manuscript with him, then technically it's not a conjectural emendation because he looked at a manuscript and saw it there. But there's questions surrounding whether or not Beza may have made a mistake there. And of course, the conversation for this issue goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that's the Cole's note on Revelation 16:5. It might be worthwhile to take a look at that at some point. I just want to ask really quickly, am I fuzzy in the camera? Is the camera like not focusing properly on me? I think I'm having some issues here. You did blur a bit. Okay, Beza came up with Esomenos. Yes, there it is. All right, so K. Lancaster, coming back to the perpetual virginity of Mary. In the Catholic edition of the RSV, they modified the verses which mention the brother of Jesus to say, to the brethren of Jesus to make it ambiguous for their tradition. Of course they did. Interesting. Her firstborn son is the harder reading to accept for the modern. Exactly. Sham, isn't that the verse that Nick Sayers did about 20 hours of video on? Yes, and he also did a debate with Tiritan Fan. I think Beza actually has a note in his text saying it's an emendation. It could be. 4:30 a.m. here. Good night, Dwayne and chat. All right, Steve, good to see you. Hey, get in touch with me sometime. I'm curious. I want to catch up, see how things are going. Jesus Freak redacts a message, and he says I'm a little fuzzy. Let me go take a look at my camera here really quickly, because this is bothering me. What is going on here? All right, there we go. All right. All right, there we go. That's better. Okay. All right, I'm back. Normally you are sharp as a razor blade. There we go. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come back to our textual variant here, because let me just take a quick look at my notes, make sure we're going to the right place. We took a look at Metzger. We took a look at Houghton. We took a look at the cricket net notes. And so now what I want to do is take you to a commentary, which was done exceptionally well. So I've got a link in the comments below. Excuse me. I've got these links in the comments below. So if you want to go and take a closer look at them, you can do that. So we're going to pop over here back to my screen share. And this is the commentary here. Let me see if I can make this bigger. I guess this is probably going to be the most I can do here. Yeah. You know what? Let's squeeze this in Oh, hey. I wonder if there's a better way to do this. Okay, you guys are just going to have to... Oh, hey, there we go. So I can make it bigger. Yeah, these are... There's the list of the manuscripts that contain the passage, just so you know. All right. Okay, so we're just going to read through this commentary because I think it captures the essence of everything that we need to capture here. So this is, again, from Dr. Jonathan Borland. He writes, a few witnesses, Aleph B, Z vid, OSA 71 vid. This is where I got my information. These are Syriac, Egyptian manuscripts. They depart from the consensus and read simply son instead of the firstborn son, which latter expression, Bengal, apparatus 93, and others suggest entered here from Luke 2:7. So there it is again. This is again talking about people who are suggesting that this is a harmonization with Luke 2:7. An explanation Whitney 15861 calls pure conjecture. Okay, so Whitney understands this idea of being a harmonization as pure conjecture. So it's as much as we look at Houghton and as much as we know of Metzger and as much as those are the big names, and if that's all we read, that's all we know, right? You need to understand that a number of other text critics, old-timey text critics, they're not satisfied with this answer of it being conjecture, of it being a harmonization with Luke 2:7. So you've got here Whitney, and you're going to find out that Griesbach also did not like this idea of a harmonization with Luke 2:7. So it continues, the older nature of the longer reading is established by its presence in a completely Matthean sequence of Tatian's diatessaron. So here we are, 200 AD. The diatessaron contains her firstborn son, a fact openly conceded by Hort and other critics such as von Soden. So again, other text critics recognize this and corroborated by its appearance in the Latin translation of Ephraim's commentary, where it is quoted 3 times as primogenitum, which is the Latin equivalent of prototokon. So we have it here. Mill, Wettstein, Griesbach, Meyer, and others suggest that the shorter reading originated in a diligent but futile attempt to suppress the notion that Mary gave birth to more babies after Jesus was born. So this is what a number of text critics believe, is that prototokon, right, firstborn, was the proper reading. It was the proper reading, but there was some editing happening to suppress this idea that Mary was not a perpetual virgin. Okay, so that is clearly what's happening. Griesbach logically suggests the same motivation behind the omission of prin e sinothen oftus in 2 manuscripts in Matthew 1:18. Fritzsch calls this explanation absurd, arguing instead that the phrase was omitted on account of its clearly superfluous appearance, since the child of one expressly referred to as a virgin would obviously be her firstborn. So he is seeing firstborn as redundant here. So who was that again? That was... So Fritzsch was seeing this firstborn as redundant since it's obvious from the context. Let me fix my microphone here. Since it's obvious from the context that this is Mary's firstborn child. But Griesbach plainly states that it appears less probable that the phrase was moved to this place from Luke 2:7, and additional evidence conforms his judgment. So it continues. The probability is great that the appearance of textate, huion, you will give birth to a son, not only once in 121, but again in 123, would have influenced, and this is important, this is an important spot, and we're going to stop here because I want to show you this, would have influenced a careless scribe to repeat the manner of expression upon the third appearance of the verb tikto in so short a space, namely, she shall bear a son, she shall bear a son, she bore a son. Assimilation, and here's the thing, or harmonization to the nearby context is always more probable than harmonization to a remote parallel, especially so Whitney, if the error occurred in the earliest of times before Matthew's gospel traveled alongside the others. Now, I want to explain what is happening here, or what he's suggesting. So remember that what has been happening with Metzger, Houghton, and a handful of others, actually, in fact, it turns out that this isn't really the majority opinion. This isn't really the scholarly consensus. That is a harmonization with Luke 2:7. Because what Dr. Borland is suggesting here with Whitney is when you take a look at the full context of the passage, you start in verse 21 with a quote, "And she shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." Right here, she will bring forth a son. That's the same word, tikto, right? Bring forth a son, call his name Jesus. So the scribe keeps copying. So all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which is spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, "Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son," tikto, "and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which is translated God with us. So we have tikto weon, texite weon, texite weon. So we're copying, it comes twice. So we get to 124. Then Joseph, being aroused from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took to him his wife, and did not know her till she had brought forth her firstborn son. Now, as a scribe who maybe didn't have enough coffee that day, or perhaps who maybe is a little bit tired, a little sleepy, maybe it's Boxing Day and the scribe has to copy down Matthew 1:20-25, and he sees texite weon, and he comes to this spot here where he is expecting to hear about Mary giving birth to a son and writes texite weon instead of prototokon, right? I mean, the endings are the same, texite weon, right? Weon. And so he just writes that down and totally forgets the rest of ton prototokon and moves on and continues copying. So it's more than likely, the argument here that Dr. Borland is making is that it's more than likely that Matthew 1:25 was harmonized with 1:23 and 1:21, and it's less likely that it was harmonized with Luke chapter 2, verse 7. So let's come back to Borland's commentary, and we'll keep going. Yes, I saw in the comments about his commentary being very extensive. It is very extensive. It's an excellent resource. So anyway, so he talks about assimilation to the nearby context is always more probable than harmonization to a remote parallel, especially if the error occurred in the earliest times before Matthew's gospel traveled alongside others. And we know this because Tatian's gospel harmonization, right, contained what was the word prototokon? Okay. The Tatian's commentary contained firstborn son, her firstborn son. All right. So Whitney further argues on grammatical grounds that Matthew, at the very least, would not have written weon without the definite article after it appeared without such in 121 and 123. So this is referring to the cataphoric use of the article, because putting the word "the" refers to two other instances of the word son. And so that's what he's arguing here. Grammatically, Matthew would put "the" in front of weon instead of weon being by itself, because he's referencing the prophecy from 23 and the words of the angel in 21. So he's pointing to a specific son, not just merely a son. So it's not likely that Matthew would have written weon without the article, which happens to be what the critical text puts it as. So anticipation of the son was born, pointing to the addition of ton or aftis, or both by scribes who perceived the problem created by earlier scribes, and that prototokon completes the idea that Joseph did not know Mary. Did I skip some? I think I skipped something there. I did. Whitney further argues on grammatical grounds that Matthew, at the very least, would not have written weon without the definite article. Actually, that's kind of weird, hearing the word definite article in relation to Greek, because there's no definite, it's just the article. Anyway, after it appeared without such in 121-23, anticipation of the son that was to be born, pointing to the addition of ton or aftis, or both by scribes who perceived the problem created by earlier scribes, and that prototokon completes the idea that Joseph did not know Mary until after Jesus' birth, indicating, as is suggested elsewhere, that Joseph and Mary later had children together. Intrinsically, as Whitney states, the expression is just what might be expected to have been written by this evangelist. So essentially, what he's saying, verse 21 and 23 culminates in verse 25, which calls him the prototokon. Okay, So it's a very important internal argument. Okay, this is all internal. Now, again, I don't think we need the internal arguments here, but nonetheless, this seals the deal further, right? That's what internal arguments are generally for, right? It's secondary to look at to make sure we're on the right track, right? All right. So the authenticity of tone off tone prototokon is to be preferred not only because it has second century attestation, right? Tatian's work, and remarkable internal arguments in favor, but primarily because of its presence in the overwhelming consensus of all Greek manuscripts, 1,450 manuscripts plus, right? Including important representatives from every text type: Alexandrian, Western, Byzantine, obviously, and the Caesarean text types. All have manuscripts with these verses. And the early church fathers has a very wide geographical spread from east to west. It doesn't, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So he continues, thus the internal evidence merely corroborates the conclusion already called for by the external evidence due to the apparent habitual accuracy of the consensus Greek text. All right. So if we scroll down, this is just a good visual representation of all the Greek manuscripts that contain her firstborn son. Right there. This list of numbers, each one of those numbers represents a singular manuscript. Okay, this is the Tut volume. I don't even know if I think this is just about all of them, but you scroll them for days. Okay, these are all the manuscripts that contain it. 1,446 manuscripts contain Firstborn Son. Then we have one here, ton huios aftis ton prototokon. Okay, this one's just weird because this is not the accusative ending. This is the nominative ending. Again, it's obviously a mistake with one witness. Then we have ton huion aftis, to him. It was born to him a son, the firstborn. Okay. This is that weird one there. We have three witnesses, but again, prototokon. So even the manuscripts which have variants in them, with just a handful of manuscripts, contain firstborn. Firstborn is clearly, it just, as you look at each individual textual variant here, right? Ton huion of two, his son, not her son, his son, his firstborn son. We have ton huion of tos, the firstborn son himself. I think that's weird. That's weird to put that there. I probably meant to put of tone. I don't know. I don't know what the scribe meant to do there, but that's a weird thing to have a nominative case there. But you see, they're prototokon. Ton huion of tis, ton huion of tis, ton huion of tis. Okay, that's clearly didography. Somebody copied the word twice, clearly, but nonetheless, right? Look, ton prototokon. So tell me again, what's going on here? Ton huion of tis, her firstborn son. What's the difference there with this one here? Ton huion of tis, ton prototokon. There's no article in front of ton. Again, taking a look at some of these. Ton huion of tis, ton huion of tis. Yeah, we went through that one. Ton huion of tis. And there it is. There's the critical text rendering right here. And again, why do I think the critical texts went with this one? It's simply as much and as cheesy as it has become to say, right? It's I think personally, it's the agreement with Aleph and B that have put huion in our in our modern English Bibles. Then we have her son, ton huion of tis, with one witness. So there's one variant without prototokon. Right here, 1182, which probably has some weird things going on with it. I didn't get a chance to take a look at it. But I mean, when you look at Tut's volumes here, it's very clear that prototokon is part of the formula. It is part of the phrase here. And for us to take out prototokon here is to take out a very important Christological reference. And it is also to take out essentially what has been transmitted to us through the Greek manuscript tradition. Big mistake. All right. So that's Borland's That's Dr. Jonathan Borland's textual commentary. I have a link to it in the description below. So if you want to go and look at this and maybe even check out some of his other stuff there, we're going to be referencing his stuff. Now he's only gotten part of the way through Matthew. So once we get out of Matthew, we won't have Dr. Jonathan Borland's work here, unless he decides to just do them. But he seems like a really busy guy, so I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, check the link below. I've got James Snapp's article in there in the link below as well. Check that out. Do yourself a favor. But the more we dive into this and the more we actually see the evidence of what's going on, the more and more convinced I become that Byzantine priority is the better option than our critical text editions. So let me pop over to my notes and see where we ended up here. We talked at length about the harmonization. Yeah. Let's come over to the comments, and then I want to talk a little bit about. Then what we'll do is we'll sum up the harmonization, mostly because I want to be able to have it summarized so I can make that video. And then I want to talk about the more difficult reading, and then mention briefly James Snapp's motif idea. So we will get there, but before we do, let's take a look at the comments and let's see what y'all are saying. All right. Excuse me. All right, bit fuzzy. I'm all sorted out. Good. I'm not sure what exactly happened there. Maybe my camera just got stuck. That's an improvement. Bingo. We demand Dwayne in high definition 4K. Well, here's the interesting thing. Okay, my camera is running through the USB-C cable into a junction box into my computer, and it's actually running at 720p. But I shrunk it down a little bit and put it into the little box there, so you can't really tell. But the camera itself is running at 720p, but the rest of the frame that you're looking at is in 1080p. So yeah, now I'm not in 4K, not yet. That's too much money for what I'm doing. All right, Borland's commentary is pretty extensive. Indeed, it is. Oh, Brother Maynard, I have the original gospel text, and I'm not sharing unless you sow a big seed into my bank account. I just learned what the phrase simony is. I didn't know that was a thing, but it's a reference back to Simon, who decided he wanted to buy the power to give the Holy Spirit to people because, he saw Paul doing it. Simon Magus. And yeah, so apparently it has become a thing that if a church, starts charging money for certain services that they really shouldn't be charging money for, we say that they are guilty of simony. So, Brother Maynard, you are being guilty of simony if you really do have the gospel text. Otherwise, you are simply lying. All right. What website are you using? So this is the TCGNT blogspot. This is put together by Dr. Jonathan Borland. And again, links in the description below. And yeah, go check it out and check out all the other work he's done there. All right, 2nd century attestation. Very nice. I didn't catch that. Apparently, the other day when I was preaching, I think it was last Sunday, I made a reference to, who was it? Nacho Libre. I made a Nacho Libre reference while I was praying, and I didn't even realize it. And they just said, "Hey, it's not Nacho." I sat down, and he's like, "It's a Nacho reference." And I was like, "Yeah, it's the best." That's funny. All right. To them, a son. I've often mistaken auftos, auftone, and autos. Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's auftu and auftone. I confused. There you go. I don't have any problem with the genitive forms of nouns. I for whatever reason, I just get them all. I understand it. I get it. Any news on the Byzantine Text type release? Yeah, so we're working. We had a little bit of a situation in regards to, I think I talked about this briefly at the start. We printed out some of the pages just to see what it would look like. And there appeared to be a mismatch with the size of the font on the software versus the size of font that actually printed. So we actually had to take that away and typeset some stuff again. And while trying to typeset some stuff, we determined that we were not able to keep ecthesis It wasn't able to, we weren't able to get the newer size of the font and the wide margin, as well as the outdented text of ecthesis into the inner margin. It became too much of a hassle, and too much of it went into the gutter. So we decided to put ecthesis in the gutter in order to maintain our wide margin and to have a larger print. So I think that was a trade-off that most people would appreciate. I think given what's happening with the volume and people who might want to read this, I think they would appreciate a larger font more than they would appreciate the ecthesis. So we did away with ecthesis. So now it's just going to be regular paragraph format. And we've included the 50 textual variants in the second apparatus again. We talked about that at the very beginning of the live stream today. So again, we still have final typesetting to do and proofreading. We're expecting to be done in the early part of 2026 with it sent off to the printers. Now there is a website. I should have thought to mention this. Maybe I'll just do a separate video for that. To go and sign your email up if you are interested in purchasing that, because we do have to have a certain amount of interest before we can send off to the printers, so someone on the team doesn't get stuck with a very large printing bill. Excuse me. So what I'll do is I'll probably do a separate video really quickly and release that so you can know where to go to get that signed. I don't have the details offhand. The website name is really weird. You'll need the link. It was in my Byzantine 2026 video that I just recently did. Yeah. All right. So that's it. We're hoping to be done early 2026, off to the printers. Printers could potentially be 6 months at the very least. So we know there's going to be a tremendous delay at the printing stage, but that's going to be out of our hands. Can we purchase this translation with purple print? Oh, good. Sham Gurmine, you're already registered. Awesome. Since you used to work in a print shop, do you have any insight on why printers are so bad to work with? No, actually, we worked, I worked in-house, right? We were actually the company. The insurance company decided to pay for printing stuff and to pay for printers and to pay for people to run the printers because they just didn't want to work with outside vendors. So that was our solution to dealing with printers being so bad to work with. Actually, I don't know if that's true. I have not experienced any of that terrible stuff there. All right. Okay. So what I am going to do here is we are going to summarize things up. Where did it go? Where are my notes? Right, so we're going to summarize up the harmonization. I know that might be a little bit repetitive, my apologies, but what is this microphone is being a pain. There we go. All right, so we're going to summarize up these the harmonization thing here. We're going to summarize the more difficult reading, and then James Snapp's motif. So I don't think I really need to share screen here. So I'm just going to leave it here and I'll just go for my notes. All right. So let's recap here. So the modern critical editions, the way in which they have tried to argue for the critical text reading, that is a son, is they suggested, and this was both suggested by Houghton and also by Metzger. And if the net did actually have an entry, I'm sure they would just parrot Metzger because that's what the net does. So they argue that it's a harmonization with Luke 2 verse 7, which uses the verbiage there, which is in Luke 2:7, and she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, again, as per Metzger, Houghton, and I think Johannes Bengel suggested this, but Griesbeck rejected this idea along with a number of other scholars, and Dr. Borland as well, suggest that this isn't the case. What they suggested was that a harmonization is more than likely to occur in the immediate context than it is to occur in something way out there, right? So, for example, Luke is not even in the same book as Matthew. And when you take a look at Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, 4 verses beforehand, and she shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. Then in Matthew 1:23, behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, or bring forth a son. And then in Matthew 25, if a scribe was sleepy and they have this idea of textate weon, bringing forth a son, then it could be that when, even though he saw ton prototokon, the firstborn, he may have just simply wrote textate weon because he had done so from verse 23 and verse 21 on the very same page that he's copying. So if we have suggested that it could be a possible harmonization with Luke 2:7, a harmonization with Matthew 1:21 and Matthew 1:23 is probably more likely because it is more local. Now, that's essentially it. Harmonization goes both ways. So who wins out on this discussion? I think the manuscript external evidence points us to which way the harmonization went. And that is, of course, the 1450 plus Greek manuscripts, which contain the Firstborn Son. Now, the second thing here, to summarize here, is that her Firstborn Son is actually the more difficult reading. So some have suggested that the shorter reading was edited in to suppress the idea that Mary gave birth to more babies after giving birth to Jesus, because many will see prototokos, right, firstborn, suggesting that it was firstborn in the text to differentiate Jesus from any other children which Mary may have had. Now, of course, the Catholic Church today and the Orthodox Church today view the perpetual virginity of Mary as church dogma, right? But we question that, right? Based on Matthew 13:55, is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? So here we have named actual brothers of Jesus: James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. And James himself, who wrote the book of James that we have in the New Testament. Now, of course, Jerome, I think himself, was the one who went to argue that these were either cousins or perhaps offspring from a previous marriage that Joseph may have had. But again, that is completely and utterly speculation, even from Jerome's perspective. And I suggest that, and I suspect, that Jerome's loyalty appears there to lie more in the church dogma than it does in the actual fact of the matter. Anyway, my point here is this, is that even though Jerome was clearly had this idea of the perpetual virginity of Mary, still considered prototokon to be the original reading, such as his commentary for the book of Matthew. So Jerome himself didn't really have an issue in using prototokon, even though it could be misconstrued as doing away with this idea of the perpetual virginity of Mary. So what does that mean for modern text criticism? Is when they take their argument that the harder reading is to be preferred, I am just simply saying that based on the beliefs of Christians in the first couple centuries of the church, that prototokos would have been the harder reading. And so we should be retaining her firstborn son as the proper reading in Matthew 1:25. Now, lastly here, to summarize up one more thing here, is James Snapp had made reference actually in this blog here. So let me pull the blog up. I'll pull the blog up here because James Snapp actually went on and commented here. So I'll just read it. So James Snapp responds in Dr. Borland's article here. This was like 10 years ago. Look at that. I would add that, thematically, Matthew calling Jesus the firstborn may be an echo of Exodus 4:22, applied to Christ in the same way that Matthew applies Hosea 11:1 to Christ. So if you go to Exodus 4:22, maybe we should do that. Let's do Exodus 4:22. Exodus 4:22. So God is talking to Moses, telling him what to say to Pharaoh, and says, "Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn." Oh, interesting. Israel is my son, my firstborn. And so what James is suggesting here is that this motif that Matthew has of going back into the Old Testament, and he uses Hosea 11:1 as an example. Let me pull that up. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Remember Matthew in chapter 2? He quotes that passage and references that to the flight into Egypt. I've called my son. So he uses this as a potential. Now, again, this isn't necessarily rock solid, but you could make the case that there is a motif in which Matthew uses the Old Testament. It's in his mind. It's there. He's like, even though he may not necessarily say it is, it's shaping the way that he's writing the scriptures. And so when Matthew writes prototokon, firstborn, it seems to be, right, a reference to Exodus 4:22. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So again, Is this like rock solid? No, I don't think you can necessarily prove these things, but it's just another one of those internal things that shows that the reading of prototokon seems to be, right, way more entrenched internally. And so it matches how well this textual variant is attested to externally. So hold on a second here. So let me, there we go. So that's what I have here in regards to Matthew 1:25. Again, I think it's very clear that the Byzantine reading is right here. And if you only read, the popular stuff on this, like Metzger and Houghton and those things, you're only going to get a very small piece of the argument. It is surprising to see that a number of English Bible translations don't even contain a footnote here, especially when this textual variant contains such richness. It's just such a rich phrase in here, her firstborn son, right? Because if you take a look at the word prototokos and you track it through the New Testament, you can see that this essentially becomes a title referencing Jesus. And it's not just simply like a title to say you're the first person who was born out of, and that may be the case somewhat here in Matthew 1. But there's this other idea involving inheritance and how the heir, right, the one who inherits all of the family goods, right, like the one who receives everything, like that's the firstborn, the prototokos, right, that's the heir of everything. Like there's just something about that. And by removing this verse, by removing this passage and going with the shorter reading, we miss that. And again, like I said, the fact that it just doesn't appear in a number of English Bible translations, at least in the footnotes, come on, guys, let's put it in the footnotes. The fact that it's not in the net translation for such a wildly attested to textual variant, not even in the net Bible, it's disappointing to say the least. Again, when we come to Metzger and Houghton, they just got a tiny little paragraph blurb that's essentially saying Luke 2:7. But I think we've demonstrated that there's a better way for that assimilation to possibly have taken place, which goes the other way. So anyway, I am convinced the Byzantine reading is indeed right, and I don't think we should cast off her firstborn son as the proper reading. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful, guys. That's what I have. So I'll probably be taking this and I'm going to be editing all of that stuff and coming out with a shorter video. Before we head off for the evening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over, take a look at the comments and see what y'all are saying. And then we'll head out. All right. So actually it's off tone. Any news in the Byzantine? We talked about that. Purple shirt. You're already registered. Awesome. Print shop stuff. Could the missing firstborn be one of those examples? Sal. Error man. Could missing firstborn be one of those examples? Can you give me a little context surrounding that? I won't leave until you do that. I wasn't sure what I was saying when you asked that question. Airman, more like Ermin. Am I right? LOL. Error man. Yeah, it's really interesting. So Bart Ehrman has apparently retired and gave his last lecture just recently, a couple days ago, I think. And I was just listening to him be celebrated for all his accomplishments and this, that, and the other. And man, he has done such damage. He has done such damage to the faith in a number of his publications, and has given a lot of ammunition to the atheists. So I am not exactly excited to be celebrating the work of Bart Ehrman. I don't know if there is like orthodox corruption of Scripture. And some of the impacts that has made in the text critical community. And I don't mean impacts like in a negative way. I think it was ultimately negative. Basically, the book has suggested, and this is just Cole's notes, that, the church corrupted the Scriptures, and so there's no way that we'll ever get back to the original text. That's essentially what the orthodox corruption of Scripture is about. And I think it generally had this idea of, the victors write the history, and so you can't really trust what your Bible says, essentially. Now, how much of his work actually made impact into modern text criticism? I want to say that there probably was. Like, a lot of people were very impacted in Ehrman's work. And so this whole idea of suggesting that there isn't really a singular original text to get back to, and now we're just trying to get to the earliest obtainable text, and this whole changing the goalpost stuff that I've talked about before. I think that was really that has been really set off again by Bart Ehrman and his work that he had done. So I don't understand, but nonetheless, what is going on here? I got stuff happening on my chat. All right. Okay. So I think if Sal doesn't respond, it either means he's really far behind, in which case, if you are, I'm sorry if I see you before I sign off. I'll ask your question. But yeah, so this is the first. This is the first video on my 50 textual variants. So this is Matthew 125. I hope you found this helpful. It kind of worked out. That's like Christmas time too, and this is a Christmas variant. So I'm not sure what the next textual variant is. I've got to go through the list and take a look. But it was fun to get it out on this one. Anyway, brothers and sisters, I hope you found this video helpful. And until next time, we'll see you around.